There is a moment in American history that nobody fully prepared you for. A moment so extraordinary, so legally unprecedented, so completely outside anything this country had ever experienced before, that when it happened, most Americans either cheered or stood completely speechless. On January 20th, 2025, Donald John Trump walked back into the White House as the 47th President of the United States. And within the first 72 hours of returning to that building, he did something that no president in the history of this nation had ever done before. He ordered the government to open the files. Not some of the files, not selected files, all of them. The files on JFK, the files on Robert Kennedy, the files on Martin Luther King Jr. 60 years of classified secrets, buried under layers of government protection, suddenly ordered to be released to the American people. My name is Professor Richard, and this is Declassified Presidents. And today, we are going to talk about what Trump actually found when he walked back into that building. And more importantly, we are going to talk about why what he did in those first hours back in power may be the most historically significant presidential act of the last 60 years. If you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because what we are about to cover is exactly the kind of history this channel exists to tell. Let us start from the very beginning, because context is everything here. When Donald Trump left the White House in January 2021, something happened that was completely unlike any presidential departure in modern American history. Weeks before he left, Trump and his aides packed boxes, hundreds of them. And according to federal investigators, those boxes did not just contain personal letters, photographs, and Christmas ornaments. They contained classified documents. Some of the most sensitive government secrets in the United States. Nuclear information, military intelligence. Documents that described operations so sensitive that even the locations of American nuclear submarines are kept secret from the Navy command itself. These were not minor files. These were the kind of documents that intelligence officials describe as among the most closely guarded secrets this country holds. And they ended up in boxes at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's private residence in Palm Beach, Florida, stored in a room that investigators later said could be unlocked with a coat hanger or a very tiny screwdriver. Let that detail sit with you for a moment. The nation's most sensitive secrets in a room that a coat hanger could open. Now, here is where this story gets complicated in a way that most people have never fully understood. Because what happened next was not just a legal battle. It was a historical collision between two completely different ideas about presidential power. Trump's position was simple. He said he had the right to those documents. He said as president he had declassified them. But then an audio recording emerged from a private meeting at his Bedminster Golf Club in July 2021, months after he had already left office. On that recording, Trump can be heard showing what appeared to be a sensitive military document to people in the room. And here is the exact sentence that changed everything. Trump said on that recording, and these are his own words, "It is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. Look at this. This was done by the military and given to me. As president, I could have declassified it, but now I can't." Read that sentence again. As president, I could have declassified it, but now I can't. That one sentence, recorded on audio, directly contradicted the entire legal argument his own team was making in court. If you are not already subscribed to Declassified Presidents, please subscribe right now, because we cover exactly these kinds of moments where history and power collide in ways that change everything. The federal investigation that followed was unlike anything in American presidential history. A grand jury was convened. The FBI executed a search warrant at Mar-a-Lago in August 2022. They retrieved boxes of documents. The indictment that followed contained 40 felony counts. 40. And inside that indictment, investigators described how some of the nation's most highly guarded secrets had been found mixed together with newspapers, thank you notes, Christmas ornaments, magazines, and photographs of Trump himself. The most powerful secrets in the most powerful nation on earth sitting in cardboard boxes next to holiday decorations. If that image does not make you stop and think about what presidential power actually means in this country, then nothing will. Trump became the first former United States president in the history of this nation to face federal criminal charges. That is not an opinion. That is a documented historical fact. The first in 240 years of American presidents. But here is where the story takes a turn that most people missed entirely. Because in November 2024, something happened that had never happened in modern American political history either. Donald Trump won the presidential election and became only the second person in American history to serve 2 non-consecutive terms as president. The first was Grover Cleveland in 1885. And the moment Trump won that election, the entire criminal case against him collapsed. Not because the evidence disappeared, but because of a long-standing Department of Justice policy that a sitting president cannot be prosecuted. The case was dismissed. And then on February 28, 2025, the Department of Justice returned to Donald Trump the very same boxes the FBI had seized from Mar-a-Lago. Trump personally brought them back to Florida. And he announced publicly that they would someday be part of the Trump Presidential Library. The man who had been indicted on 40 felony counts for possessing those documents now had those same documents returned to him by the government. American history does not get more dramatic than that. Now we get to the part of this story that is genuinely one of the most significant presidential acts of the modern era, and somehow most Americans still do not fully understand what it means. On January 23, 2025, just 3 days after returning to the White House, Trump signed an executive order that had an extraordinarily direct title: Declassification of Records. Concerning the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. In plain language, Trump ordered the intelligence community to release everything, every document, every file, every piece of evidence that had been classified and hidden from the American public for over 60 years, and the order did not give the intelligence agencies years to comply. It gave them 15 days to present a plan for JFK, 45 days for RFK and MLK. 15 days. Think about what that means. For 6 decades, every president who sat in the Oval Office had access to those files. Every single one of them chose to keep them sealed. And here is the question that should be burning in your mind right now. What is in those files that made every president for 60 years decide the American people were not ready to read them? Subscribe to Declassified Presidents if you want us to go deep into those JFK files in a dedicated episode, because what has already emerged from those 80,000 newly released pages is extraordinary. Because here is what we know so far. The Trump administration declassified 80,000 pages of records related to President Kennedy's assassination. 80,000 pages. Documents that had been sitting in government archives since 1963 finally made available to the American public. And a congressional hearing examining those files produced a statement that should stop every American cold. According to Pew Research, trust in the federal government has plummeted from 74% in 1958 to just 22% in 2025. From 74% to 22%, that is not a decline. That is a collapse. And the congressman who read those numbers into the congressional record said directly that a lot of that decline in trust is justified. A sitting United States congressman standing in the halls of Congress saying to the American people that their distrust of their own government is justified. When was the last time you heard that said openly in Washington? Socialnomics, socialnomics. There is another layer to this story that goes even deeper, and it connects to something that happened in Trump's first term that most people have completely forgotten. In May 2017, just months into his first presidency, Trump held a meeting in the Oval Office with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. In that meeting, Trump disclosed classified intelligence to the Russian officials. The intelligence had been provided by a United States ally. It concerned a planned ISIS operation, and the details were specific enough that, according to current and former government officials, The Russians could potentially deduce both the identity of the Allied intelligence source and the method by which the intelligence had been collected. The CIA was subsequently forced to extract a key Moscow intelligence source that had been developed over years of careful work. One of America's most valuable intelligence assets, gone because of what was said in that Oval Office meeting. And Trump's own former press secretary, Stephanie Grisham, said publicly afterwards, "I watched him show documents to people at Mar-a-Lago on the dining room patio. So he has no respect for classified information, never did." That statement came not from a political opponent. It came from someone who worked directly for him inside the White House. So, what does all of this mean when you stand back and look at the full picture? Here is what Professor Richard wants you to think about carefully. Donald Trump is simultaneously the president who ordered the release of more classified American historical secrets than any president in 60 years, and the president who became the first in American history to be federally indicted for mishandling classified documents himself. He opened the files on JFK, RFK, and MLK for the American people, while at the same time his own classified document handling became the subject of the most dramatic federal criminal case in the history of the American presidency. That contradiction is not a small detail. That contradiction is the central story of presidential power in modern America. The question of who controls information, who decides what the American people are allowed to know, who gets to hold secrets, and who gets punished for it. These are not abstract questions. They are the questions at the very heart of what American democracy actually is. And here is the final thing Professor Richard wants to leave you with today. The special counsel's final report on the classified documents case will not be made available to the public or even to the House and Senate Judiciary Committees. On February 23, 2026, a federal judge made that block permanent, ruling that no information in the report could be shared outside the Department of Justice. The full truth of what those classified documents contained, what secrets were in those boxes, what the most sensitive files removed from the White House actually said, that report is now permanently sealed from the American people. A president ordered 80,000 pages of 60-year-old secrets released to the public. And the full report on his own classified documents is now permanently hidden from that same public. America is a country that was built on the idea that the people have the right to know the truth about their own government. And yet here we are in 2026, still asking the same question that echoes through every dark chapter of this channel. What are they not telling us? And why? Subscribe to Declassified Presidents right now and hit the notification bell, because next week we are going deeper into those newly released JFK files and what those 80,000 pages actually reveal. Because the story is far from over. And Professor Richard will be here every single week, making sure you know the history they would rather you forgot.